Yes. Okay. So we have Yuri with us today, who's been investing with Cambridge Wealth for a while. As you know, I'm Chinmay, founder and CIO of Cambridge Wealth. Yuri is a director with a technology company in Singapore. A lot of experience with his technology career. He's been investing with us for the last 5 years, so we thought it's a nice idea to see through the hindsight or through the looking glass, what is it that he's kind of learned, how the experience has been, and on what we can do together going ahead. So this is just an open, candid chat. I have some questions with me, and I'll love to run you through some of them here.
Cool. Sounds good.
Super. So just tell me about a little bit of your kind of journey in life, and then we'll go into the to the investment bit, right? How's it been so far, and what have you been up to?
Okay. So I think I started my career in the US. So I started my career in India, didn't make enough money to invest. So when I moved to the US, I finally started making some money. I think everybody then starts to think about, how do you want to invest? Where do you invest? In the US, you would read a book by Tony Robbins or Warren Buffett who will say, put it into an ETF and forget about it, right? And then you're like, but at least at that time, India didn't even have ETFs. So you're like, okay, what does that mean? If I want to invest in India, which, the whole India growth story, how do I invest? Usually, most people of my age would invest in a mutual fund. Now, the way they would do it is, and the way I did it was, you go on moneycontrol.com, you look at the mutual funds. They are all rated, I think, either red or green or yellow, or there's a grading A or B or C. It's quite simple. You're like, okay, cool. So I'm just going to choose all the ones that are rated A or rated green and go with that. So I did that in the first maybe 3, 4, 5 years of my investing journey. Horrendous. What everybody says is, past record is not a predictor of future success. 100% true in mutual funds, where, as you've explained to me many times, economies go through cycles, investments go through cycles. And if you're only looking at what's happened in the past, that's a horrible way to decide how you want to invest in the future. So after doing investing unsuccessfully for 5 or 6 years, that's when I guess met you, and kind of things changed for the better.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting, right? So what was really the difference, right? Like you said, some kind of mistakes or some kind of performance errors. But what's been the major difference working, with investments before we started working together and maybe after?
So one is the forward-looking piece, right? Like, if you are not full-time in the market, which I think most working professionals are not, right? You're going to read 1 or 2 articles that you read on your WhatsApp group, or your uncle told you invest here or invest there. You have no way to not predict, but even kind of hypothesize about where the market is going, where the country is going, where the economy is going. So there is no forward-looking guidance. The only guidance you have is that backward-looking piece, and that's not a great way to do investments. 2, when you do speak to wealth advisors, I think everybody in India has had this experience. A wealth advisor tends to be a glorified mutual fund salesman, right? So they're going to sell you, they want to push you to invest in certain mutual funds from which, they get commissions, or they might genuinely actually believe that those are good mutual funds as well, right? But this is just a guy who's selling mutual funds. Can you trust this person to know where the economic cycle is going? Not really, right? He's also probably looking at the same money control rankings that I'm looking at. So that's the second piece, which is the expertise.
A lot of the times it is that.
It is a bit of, and then thirdly, I would say transparency or trust is very hard to establish, right? Because everybody has some favorite story of how they've gotten conned, or how they were misled, or how they lost money. And when it comes to investing your hard-earned money, I think that's always on your mind, right? Especially in India, is that safety first. You want transparency, you want trust, but you don't get that right off the bat with anybody. And so, yeah, I would say.
And perhaps sometimes you get trust, but they may not be coupled with the knowledge.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get knowledge and may not be coupled with the.
One or two, right? You really like somebody and you're like, this person I can hang out with. That's great, but that's not necessarily the person you want to trust to manage your money, and vice versa.
Right. Well, that's an interesting kind of piece. And then once we started working together, other than the performance, what's really been the shift, or what has been different since between your earlier investment journey and now?
So one thing, I like about you and your company's approach is that you all are very honest and transparent about the assumptions, the analysis that goes into the investment decisions that you are recommending, right? You're not just going out and doing those unilaterally. Because at the end of the day, to what I was saying earlier, you want a forward-looking viewpoint, but that forward-looking viewpoint is going to be based off of certain assumptions, certain analysis, certain homework. And so rather than the person on TV who's like, go out and buy this because I say so, your approach has been a more thoughtful, more cautious, more evidence-backed one, which is this is our viewpoint on the market based off of this that we are seeing. I really like that. I come from an engineering background. I come from a science background, somebody who wants to know why you're saying what you're saying, knowing fully well that sometimes things change. But I want to know what made us go a certain direction. And that's been really good, where you guys are very upfront about what's going into making certain decisions. You're also good at pivoting when those don't work, or those don't work as well as expected, or things change in the market, right? Now, most times when you're a wealth advisor, you don't want to go back to your guy and say 6 months in that, that thing we said last time didn't happen, right? Sometimes those things happen. So many different things now in the market. COVID happened, right? You need to pivot quickly. And the person who's holding on to that opinion from pre-COVID, because that's what I said to my client, is the worst person to be with. So that quickness, that flexibility, that agility has also been something that I like. Thirdly, you're quite tech savvy. So a lot of the time when you are working with a mutual fund agent, even if he's a cool dude, horrible at tech stuff, right? So you're constantly getting a huge number of WhatsApp messages, you're getting 100 emails, lots of redundant messaging, lots of redundant stuff that you go through. You all have your app, you all have your research, your analysis that's presented in a very professional way, which totally appeals to me.
Well, thank you for you're being kind, but thank you for, giving us a vote of confidence. So, it's interesting because right now you're looking at, both of these times in hindsight. But when you start working with someone, this one is not easy in terms of investments, right? Because it only becomes evident if you're right or wrong about 5 years down the line. And honestly, all of us just have like 4 or 5 such periods before we do not have any more time left to invest.
Yeah.
So that point of time, how do you make that decision? Because it's a critical decision. One thing you can't get back is lost time. You might make more money in those 5 years, so it may not matter what you invested then. But what you can't get back is the journey that you did. So how do you, or what is it that you looked at that you felt went your way at the point of choosing an investment team or an investment manager?
So one is, I think, transparency. Like I said earlier, right? I spoke about it. I want to know why you're recommending what you're recommending. And you can go out and speak to a bunch of advisors who will tell you a bunch of different things. Not a lot of them will share the logic or the background behind why they are recommending certain ways of action, right? So that's one. Two is, you can go to a lot of wealth advisors who will tell you that you don't have the money for you to be worth their while, right? They're going to be like, boss, give me 100 crores or I don't care, or give me 10 crores and I don't care, right? So one is that you were open to, taking on my investment. Two, you were very transparent about it. Three, I mean, reputation does go a long way, right? So we know a lot of, same people. You have an established reputation in the market of being trustworthy, being straightforward, being transparent. I think all of those things played a part.
It's interesting.
In the initial decision.
Yeah.
In the long run, obviously, you want the results, right?
Of
Which
course.
is why at the end of it,
Of course.
proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? And we have seen that together. But initially, when you're making that jump, then those are things that come.
Because, it's interesting that you say that, because absolutely that is the conundrum that you're in when you select an investment strategy, not just a manager as well, because you cannot predict how it will look like in 3 years, and you got to make the decision today.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's interesting that the things about transparency or the things about reputational advantage that you spoke of are definitely some things to probably keep in mind. Looking back at so you had like a 10-year investment journey, right? Is there anything you would have done differently in your journey? Had I just, with all of the wisdom and hindsight that you have, if I turn the clock 10 years back, put you back there in terms of investments?
I think one is, I would not do the DIY stuff that I did, obviously. I think there's a cottage industry out there that's trying to give individual investors this false notion or confidence that whatever they do is probably as good as somebody who's doing that full time. And that's just not true. That's not true in any vocation, right? Why should it be true in a super complicated vocation like predicting where economies are going or where sectors are going or where the markets are going? So there is a value to being in the market in a regular way, in an informed way. So I would tell myself to not underestimate it. Am I going to put in 12 hours understanding in the market? No. Then in that case, I want to be with somebody who I trust to do that on my behalf. And I think most people, when they start off, they think, oh, I can do this myself. And I would definitely not do that. And the results have shown that as well along the way.
All right. This reminds me of a classification that they have in the insurance industry. So the age group of between about 24 to 29 are the age group that they call invincibles.
Yeah.
Because at that point of time, you feel nothing bad ever going to happen to me. I know all the answers.
Yeah.
It's just about doing it, and I'm going to come out on top. And it's interesting because by 29 or 30, reality kicks in and you start realizing, to your benefit actually, the strengths and the weaknesses that you have.
Yeah.
Because then you can work on your strengths and you can actually seek help for your weaknesses. And that makes a far better design than kind of trying to do everything yourself and do it well, right? So
I think another thing that comes to mind is like, even when you do start investing yourself, you might even have a positive track record for the first 5 years. Now the question is it positive? Is it more positive than what you would have gone going about it with a wealth advisor? It's something to keep in mind, right? Because let's say you made that 10% CAGR in the first 5 years, but if that's trailing the market indices or that's trailing what a full-time professional advisor is getting, that's 5 years in the market that you've lost 4%, 5%, whatever that delta is, right? And the power of compounding works both ways, right? So that those losses that you make early on in your investment cycle probably count for a lot more. And those are way more important perhaps than when you are further down the line. So that's something else to keep in mind is that, just because you have some positive returns, you need to benchmark that with what you could have gotten if you had professional help.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that you've kind of caught on to that, because the interesting part, Yuri, is that when you lose 5 years worth of returns, they are not the first 5 years of returns that you've lost, but the last 5 years, because that's when the bigger chunk of compounding is going to happen. And those are the ones that get chopped off, right? Truncated before you can invest. So the stop is clear.
Yeah.
The start is not. So you push the start ahead and you lose the last 5 years of returns, which are the biggest kind of probably doubling of your net investment that you're going to have between 55 and 60, suppose, right? And that's what you lose if you don't start, say, at 30, you start at 35.
And you don't even realize it. You think you've done a good job. You're like, I got my 10%, look at me. And you don't realize it.
Absolutely. That is the other kind of principle of opportunity loss. You see real losses, but you don't see opportunity losses. And therefore, you don't realize what could have been possible.
Yeah, I'm an expert at opportunity.
Now, all of us are. I think all of us who know we're experts at opportunity losses can have a window to kind of learn from the rest of us.
So whoever is watching this video, please learn on our, at our cost. We've already paid the cost for it. It's too late for us, but it's
absolutely.
Not too late for the
Absolutely.
this video.
Yeah, because the one principle that I would have also kind of picked, like I had the fortune to have a professor at my design college who actually told me that if you want to do good design, invest.
Yeah.
Because unless you're financially free, you cannot do anything well, because there are other considerations all the time, right? And therefore it puts a cap onto whatever you do in life. And this is one thing that can kind of enable you in many other areas of your life, including family, friends, professionally. If you want to take some time off to learn something tomorrow, so it all helps. And he's being absolutely humble, but he's done not so badly himself for sure. So what you've done today has liberated you to
absolutely
of take decisions that you otherwise would have balked at.
Yeah, you don't want to take career decisions ideally just based off of financial reasons, right? You want to be able to have that financial freedom to follow your heart, adopt a dog,
Yeah.
get that
Yeah.
apartment that you've always looked for your parents, perhaps get them something. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Super. Any other than your reflection on your experience, any advice you would have for investors? Say someone who's 30 or 35 who's starting off on the investment front. Um, Anything that they should kind of look out for?
I guess, I mean, there's some of the same things that I said earlier, right? Which is, there's a lot of fake news out there. There's a lot of tips and scams and WhatsApp groups and uncles giving you tips and all. Just ignore a lot of that. Another thing I think, especially with so many people now, having careers abroad, keep in mind that what works in the US market may or may not work in the Indian market, right? Like if you look at the ETF example, which Warren Buffett will say put it in an ETF. Well, the US has 500 strong companies that sit in an ETF versus a lot of the returns in the India market are delivered by a small bunch of groups. So if you're doing an India ETF, of which there are now many, you're almost handicapping yourself because there just isn't that breadth of companies available out there. So I guess take advice with a grain of salt, or maybe don't take it unless it's coming from somebody who is in their full time,
Yeah.
professional.
No, I think fab kind of pro tip there. I think two learnings I've had, about advice. Like, see, look, Buffett is a great example, right? Buffett can't go wrong what he's saying, and he cannot be against you in terms of your journey. However, what your journey is and where you are in your journey and what geo and what's working there is an entirely different matter. So I would take like large, kind of wide advice and then kind of narrow it down, saying, yeah, Buffett is saying invest, fab, I should.
Yes.
Right? And then how? Yeah, a good idea, convinced, fine. But then how can be localized? There needs to be a combination like of universal advice and local advice. There are, other piece that we get in terms of advice from our parents is always buy a house, right? For example.
Yeah.
But it's up to you to decide what amount of flexibility you want in your life, when, how do you do that? One of my favorite examples is when I was not in India, I was in the UK that time. Just moved to the UK. I came and saw an apartment in Pune, about 2 crore rupees at that point of time, booming. Everyone was just going up. All of that just didn't make sense to me because rentals were 20K. So I'm like 1%. Really? How does it ever work? Came back in moved back to India 2016. In 2022, I bought the same apartment for 2 crore 10 lakh.
Yeah.
Which by now had become far cheaper, courtesy inflation and the other returns that I had made in that period of time. Didn't need to worry about that piece. So same advice applied at different points in life to different things makes a lot of difference.
I mean, what you're saying is something that I think, and maybe beginners or maybe people who are not from a math background kind of forget is absolute returns versus CAGR, right? You hear so many uncles saying that, oh, I bought this house for 5 lakhs and now it's worth 10 lakhs. It's doubled or it's tripled without taking into account how long has it been doubling or tripling, right? Because you need to compare those annualized returns with the annualized returns you would have made if you were in the market. Now, even a very basic investment in the Indian stock market would have given you 15% probably annual returns. You need to compare that 15% with, did your house appreciate by that much? In most cases, not. So that's another thing I would think people need to keep in mind.
Okay, so I think one, just to sum that up, you said about the kind of looking at piecemeal kind of investment advice.
Yeah.
Then you spoke about starting early and choosing wisely. The DIY piece. Tell me a little bit about it, because it's you've had a long experience with it. How did it work and how did it not work? Like, how did it work at first?
Honestly, and this is when I was saying earlier, like it did increase, right? Because I started my investment journey after the financial crisis. Whatever you invested in increased during that time, right? It's obvious. And it gives you a false sense of security. One is that it is increasing, and to what you earlier mentioned about the opportunity cost, you are not thinking about, is it increasing enough? Is it increasing enough in comparison to the index? Is it increasing enough in comparison to a professional investor? That opportunity cost is definitely something I didn't think of till the returns start to. And then after 3 or 4 years, the returns start to die out because a lot of these mutual funds are just a random aggregation of stuff.
And you may not churn them at the right time, or you may not make
even
those
churn them at the
choices.
right time. Exactly. You don't know when to sell, right? Because if it's all positive for a long amount of time, you are then
When to move up.
sunk into, oh, this is this genius move that I made. I'm not going to leave it.
Yeah. Anchor bias.
Anchoring bias. It's exactly that. So yeah, I think sorry, what was the question? I think I forgot the question.
No, really. I mean, just that, from what is that DIY journey really taught you? Because it's a very what happens is in investments, the transaction is often confused for the decision, right? So it's easy to invest in a fund. It's not very difficult. It's not rocket science. Is it worth it? So we confuse the ease of doing it by the ease of making a right decision or the good decision.
You overestimate your expertise. You kind of feel super happy about the positive investments that you've made and kind of
Ignore
to the background the reds, or not even the reds. Right? They might not be reds because the whole market is going up, but the not so goods you kind of relegate. And you know what? In the next 5-year cycle, I will get all of these good. Right? That's just underestimating. I guess overestimating your own expertise, and the time that you can allocate to these things is something that I definitely did.
Yeah, the time is another important factor. I mean, just probabilistically, there are legions of analysts analyzing individual stocks on, say, with a JP Morgan, or in India with say a Franklin Templeton, or something like that, or an HDFC mutual fund. What's really the probabilistic odds that I can bet against this group? And super sharp guys, right? I had from all the best institutes and IITs and IIMs, and I could bet for them or I could bet against them. And I always feel, as a retail investor, when you go solo, you're kind of betting against that. And when you go with the right type of funds that suit you, I mean, many caveats there. I'm just saying go and blindly buy whatever they're selling. But there's a way to kind of get these intelligent minds on your side rather than off your side. So that's probably another this thing. Okay, so interesting. So we've gone kind of through your past journey, pre started working together, post starting working together. So let's come to the kind of heart of what all investors are looking for. So what's the performance like? What's your feeling about the performance? Because it's not just numbers, right? It is for all of us. It's hard-earned money. We're investing. We're taking risks. We're believing in someone when we are investing. So what's the performance been like? How has it been in terms of the journey for you? Has it largely been for example, a very, very good stock can be a painful journey because it's very volatile? Or has it been a smooth journey? Or what's the journey been like on performance?
So one is performance-wise, we have substantially outperformed the market, and that's the biggest indicator, really, right? Like, you can say everything else, but over a sustained, not in a year or two, right? Anything can happen in a year or two, but over this massive period of time that we work together, we have consistently, substantially outperformed the market. We've also pivoted when needed, right? And I think one of the biggest gains that we had was post-COVID, when the market was, down in the gutter, is when it takes a lot of guts to make that call at that time to be like, now is the time to go in and invest. And honestly, as an individual consumer investor, that's the last time many a times you go in when the going is good. Versus when the opportunity is there. COVID was a massive opportunity for the people who recognized it, that the stock markets had undervalued massively, and it was a great opportunity to get in. And that's when, over our entire period almost, we have been on STPs, for example, which again is a great way to, dollar cost averaging or rupee cost averaging in this case, right? Great way to invest. Till the point where you see a massive opportunity, you need somebody to identify that, you need somebody to quantify that, and then tell you that, hey, this is an opportunity right now. That's when we saw massive gains. Now again, picking the market, picking stocks, picking timing is really hard, right? So that's not something that happens all the time, but when there is a clear and obvious opportunity backed by research, is the time to go in and make a killing, right? And that definitely bought a lot of trust and confidence, because I know that definitely I would have not done that at that point of time.
Mm-hmm. And what did we do? So I remember in May 2020, we were having this conversation. And I think it was, if my memory kind of serves me right, it was about 75% of your net worth that we went that we deployed in about 10 days into small cap equities, and
And it was a complete change, right? Because till that point, it was all STB, STB, STB. And it would have been probably the easy thing to do is just keep doing what you're doing and see how things go. But that ability to take that call and inspire confidence in that call, right? Because at the end of the day, it is my money that has to go in there. And I think we did a fabulous job of being very agile and open to that opportunity and, going in. And that gives you that,
yeah,
big
the faith and confidence and the payout.
that everybody's looking for.
Yeah, so I think just that year we got about 80%
Yeah.
kind of gains. You also worked. You also considered other managers you briefly worked with. One, and how was the experience there, and what were the kind of differences?
So one, I mean, again, to what I said, and different people want different things or prioritize different things, right? And so for me, you can have a manager who's confident, and I appreciate that. But I also want them to tell me where is that confidence coming out of, right? Now, again, I don't expect them to share like a 1,000-page analysis of the entire stuff, but tell me the story. Tell me what is this based off of? What are you counting on? What are the risks? What are the, what are the ways in which this might fail, and why you think the upside of that is so much better than the risk? I want that transparency. I want, at the end of the day, for it to be my decision based off of the research and expertise coming off of you, right? And very few wealth advisors will take, well, if they have done that analysis, right? There'll be a certain amount who have not done any analysis. There'll be a certain amount who've done some analysis and might not be great analysis. There might be some who've done it and don't want to share it with you. I am a demanding consumer. I want great analysis. I want it put in a language that I understand and explain to me so that I take that final call. And I think that's been, a massive differentiator. And then like I said earlier, right, that the tech first approach is important. I mean, today, who wants to talk on the phone, really, right? Like, you don't want 100 phone calls saying, oh, this farm is this or that or whatever. I mean, with you guys, it's always been either via your app or maybe through WhatsApp when required. We've had quarterly Zoom calls where we've discussed, all of these investment strategies. Everything else is kind of integrated. You might need to put in an OTP once in a while, which is good because you should, at the end of the day, have the final say. But I think wherever possible, I've noticed you guys have employed technology to make things faster and quicker, which I think for a millennial like me is really important, because the last thing I want is to courier some forms halfway across the world.
Right. Oh, that's an important thing. So, to sum that up, kind of research-backed insight is what you're looking for,
share
and share it. Yeah.
Don't just
Share it if
research
you
it
have
and
it.
keep it.
Don't tell me I have research.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me more.
And what's the data backing it, and then the technology, of course. I mean, in most of these areas, it has simplified our life a lot. Unfortunately, investments seem to be a little bit behind the curve. Even when technology has been used for investing, it's largely been to automate transactions and not as much insight. So perhaps that's something we focus on very heavily, and I'm glad that it kind of makes a difference, because it's great to see, right? We have our tech team sitting right out there, the product team, and they would be so happy to hear what you're saying. So I'll introduce you to them at some point.
Awesome. Good job, tech team.
Good. How did you come to a conclusion? So this piece that you mentioned, right, investment ideas and backing, this could have been a fast flash in the pan when you made the decision, right? And honestly, we were building the technology when you made the decision, and then over a period of time you experienced it. How did you make the decision early on? Because and the reason I ask you this is because a lot of advisors have, or mutual fund managers have the art of kind of communicating pieces as if it's been an investment backed piece, right? It's tough to discern for an early investor on how to kind of choose the right strategy, choose the right manager, choose the right support team, all of that. So how did you kind of make that choice?
I don't know. I guess deep down, I think if you're an Indian person, you tend to already kind of have your antennas up for people with the gift of gab, right? We are naturally skeptical people. We are naturally like, how are you trying to scam me? I want to know. I at least we have that where, I probably am not accepting everything just because somebody
On
in a
face.
suit says so or somebody with great hair says so, right? I want that.
Clearly, I have none of the two.
Yes.
So, good way for you to trust me.
You had good hair when we started.
So it's managing your investments.
Yeah, now it's tough. All
The story. Next part of this thing is going to be focused on my journey with you. Once a quarter.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that, like, I think you just need to be as aware as you are in any other aspects of your life, right? To take things, to analyze them, look for opinions, second opinions, third opinions, verify what people are saying. Don't accept any kind of advice without doing your own background research or something, I guess, without doing your homework, which is true for anything, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And anything, but also things that have an outsized impact on our life, right? Health, fitness, financial health, even something like an insurance, which covers risk in life for you. I often find that a lot of the times we focus a lot on the details, right? Like you probably spend 3x the amount of time you choosing a doctor or a wealth advisor or a wealth manager or an insurance plan that you would choose looking at like what meal to order, right? And if you look at the impact, this is like 100x impact of that meal, right? At the minimum, any of these pieces, right? Your health, your fitness, uh, your financial planning, all of that. So I think it's, point, made by you in terms of, spending that time choosing the right person and for the right reason. Absolutely well taken there. Now, if there was one thing, Yuri, that I'd ask you in terms of what would help improve your experience further than what you've kind of shared with us, what would something be?
I guess there's not a whole lot. I mean, it's been a largely awesome experience. I think something we've discussed in the past is that when we do make decisions, kind of just capturing the assumptions or the analysis behind those and just recording it for posterity from a learning perspective, right? Because you don't want to be making the same mistakes twice.
Right.
We haven't so far. But I think that's always a good habit in general, like with anything that you're doing is, being a little bit more organized in that aspect, I guess. But otherwise, it's been really, very good.
Yeah, being very kind. Thank you, Yuri. Thanks a lot. All right. Good.